Okay, recording has started. Fantastic. All right, take it away, Jesse.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jesse Jimenez. As Patricia said, I work in the compliance unit for grants monitoring and administration. We've put together this presentation on the changes in Section 3 to share with you how those things are going to be affecting all of us as we work on projects that are affected by these guidelines. Just a quick note that we use Community and Planning Development Notice 2107. You can see it there at the bottom of the first slide. The majority of the information that we're going to be presenting comes from that particular HUD notice. So let's move to the first slide. So obviously the rules have changed. Effective November 30, 2020, HUD updated the Section 3 guidelines, and there were several reasons for that. Among them were to create incentives for employers, to retain and invest in low and very low income workers, to streamline reporting requirements and provide additional program-specific oversight, and clarify the obligations of the entities involved that are covered by Section 3. So the final key changes, to the rule are any project that is a housing construction or rehabilitation project that receives over $200,000 in total housing and community development financial assistance from HUD programs, that will trigger all the Section 3 guidelines. So among those housing and community development programs, we have CDBG, Home, NSP, CDBG, DR, Disaster Recovery, Housing Trust Fund, Emergency Solutions Grant, and HOPWA. So those are some of the programs that would where the funding would come from that would trigger these requirements. So Section 3 requirements are going to apply to the entire project. Once the $200,000 threshold is met, that will trigger these requirements. And whether, HUD funding funds only that small portion, all the other funding is still going to fall under those guidelines. So hiring efforts made during the construction process are going to fall under the Section 3 guidelines. And these regulations are applicable starting after July 1 for, funds that are committed, to a project. So just a little glance back at the old rules. Number one, in the prior rule, a temporary employee or a temporary hire and a full-time permanent hire were counted as the same. So that didn't place enough value on long-term employment. The former benchmarks were 30% of people hired by Section 3 funding must be Section 3 residents. 10% of the total funds for construction contracts had to be awarded to a Section 3 business. 3% of the total funds for non-construction awarded to Section 3 businesses. Prior, a Section 3 resident was defined as one that lived in a public housing or were low and very low income persons who lived in metropolitan areas where the project where the housing community development was located. The prior rule didn't make any distinction or prioritization for hiring, targeted Section 3 workers. And a Section 3 concern had to be 51% owned by a Section 3 residents. At least 30% of the employees were currently Section 3 residents or within the first 3 years of employment. And a business that contracted more than 25% of all subcontracts to a Section 3 business concern. So those were, the prior, guidelines. The new rule tries to emphasize a greater value on permanent job by focusing on labor hours instead of new hires. So this creates an incentive for employers, to invest and retain newly hired low-income workers. The final rule benchmarks include 25% of all labor hours must be performed by a Section 3 worker, and 5% of all labor hours must be performed by targeted Section 3 workers. So the new rule emphasizes the priority of hiring targeted Section 3 folks living in public or Section 8 assisted housing, or within a mile of radius of the project site. So enforcement and compliance will be integrated into regular program office work by HUD. So this is a new definition for a social Section 3 worker, excuse me. So a Section 3 worker is a low or very low income person that met the HUD income limits for the previous or annualized calendar year. Or it can be a person that is employed by a Section 3 business concern, or a youth build participant, which is a Department of Labor program that provides job training and educational opportunities for at-risk youth who have previously dropped out of school. So the documentation that's going to be required to be maintained by employers, and we only need to do one of the following, and these records have to be retained for a period of 5 years. So it can be a worker's self-certification, stating that their income met the HUD income guidelines. It could be a worker's self-certification that they participate in a means-tested program, such as public housing or Section 8. It can be a certification from a public housing authority, an owner or property manager of a project-based Section 8 assisted housing, or an administrator of a tenant-based Section 8 assisted housing program. So another one would be an employer's certification that a worker's income from that employer is below HUD's income limits on an annualized basis and on an annualized and full-time basis. Finally, an employer's certification that the worker is employed by a Section 3 business concern. So a targeted Section 3 worker is someone that is employed by a Section 3 business concern. I think that was also one of the criteria for a Section 3 worker. But I think that there's an emphasis that's placed on here that currently meets, or when hired, met at least one of the following. And here's that emphasis on living within the service area or the neighborhood of the project. And that would be like 1 mile from the Section 3 project, unless there are fewer than 5,000 people living within that mile radius. Then we would look at a circle centered on the project until we expand it out to encompass a population of 5,000. So that's a key factor there. And also it could be someone that is a youth build participant. So those are the criteria for a targeted Section 3 worker. So the documentation that would be required for a targeted Section 3 worker would be an employer's confirmation that a worker's residence is within 1 mile of the work site. Or, as we stated earlier, if fewer than 5,000 people living within that 1 mile, we would expand out in a circle centered on that work site until we had enough of a population that we encompassed 5,000 people. So the employer would have to confirm that, or the employer could certify that the worker is employed by a Section 3 business concern. Or we could have the worker's self-certification that the worker is a youth build participant. And here is the recommended self-certification form. We use this form because it was provided, to the staff that attended Section 3 training. So this has the required information that we would need. If someone wanted to use their own letterhead or business information, at a minimum, we would require this information. If you would want to add more to it, we would need to review that and make sure that it was approved before it was implemented. But this is the recommended form that we have for self-certification. And I think I'm going to pass it on to Mr. Palmer.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Christopher Fulmer. I am the compliance manager with the city of San Antonio, and we're going to talk about what it takes to become a Section 3 business, and we're also going to talk a little bit more about the requirements to qualify as Section 3 workers. So there's more than one way to become a Section 3 business concern. So the first one is the organization is 51% owned and controlled by one or more individuals who qualify as low income, or they can be residents of federally assisted housing like Section 8 or public housing. And they kind of separate those two out a little bit. I'm not sure just why, but they're basically the same thing, except the way they're actually certified. And then the other one is that 75% of labor performed by the organization over the prior 3-month period is performed by individuals who qualify as low income. So if you've been using people who qualify as low income for the past 3 months, then you can qualify as a Section 3 business concern. Next, please. Okay, so there's a couple of ways to register as a Section 3 business concern. Both of them are online. One way is to register with us on the GMA website, or you can register directly with HUD, which it'll get you more exposure with the other agencies other than COSA. Both links are right here. So if you register with us, which you're certainly welcome to do, we'll provide you a form to fill out, and then we'll have you in our database. And other people can come to us for our database if they want. But if you register with HUD, then you're going to be on our database, SAHA, the outlying cities, Bexar County, things of that nature. So it gives you a lot more exposure if you register directly with HUD. Okay, next. This is the document you'll complete to become a certified Section 3 business. It'll be provided to you as a fillable PDF. It's pretty straightforward, names and addresses and business types, and then place to mark which of the 3 basic requirements that you meet in order to become Section 3 business certified. Okay, next. Okay, this is a list of documentation that needs to be retained by Section 3 certified organization. Not all of it necessarily applies. For instance, I'm not aware of any labor unions in San Antonio that we need to be notified. And some of it, like payroll records, you're already keeping. So you just kind of look through it and read through it when you get ready and see what kind of documentation you have available to you, and see the things that you would need to do. Because like I said, some of it is addressed to different things. So it applies variably here and there. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we'll provide you with a fillable PDF form for reporting Section 3 hours by all job site tradesmen and laborers each month. It'll be due on the 15th, just like your monthly performance report. After the project is complete, we'll need a final Section 3 report from you for the entire project. GMA staff will review the documentation to see if our Section 3 goals were met and then determine the type of documentation required as backup. Needed backup will be heavily influenced by the success of meeting your Section 3 goals. So if we meet the Section 3 goals, we're going to require things like timesheets, which, like I said, you're already keeping anyway. But if we don't meet the Section 3 goals, then we're going to have to provide evidence that we tried. And I'll get into that a little deeper here in a minute. One thing that's good is if your project triggers Davis-Bacon, you can use LCP Tracker to manage your Section 3 reporting. Unfortunately, LCP Tracker is not designed to track Section 3 without the Davis-Bacon component. So if you don't have Davis-Bacon, then you're going to have to do it manually. But if you do, it can be done as part of your Davis-Bacon reporting. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so just like we used to do, these requirements are passed down to all contractors and subcontractors performing work on the project. If Section 3 is applicable to the project, it's required for the entire project, even if part of the work is not receiving any HUD funding. It's the developer's responsibility to ensure that your contractors and subcontractors are reporting Section 3. Usually our contracts will have a Section 3 clause in it, and it will say that you have to include that section in any contracts you have with subcontractors. And it also requires with contractors rather, and then it'll require the contractors to have that section in their contracts with the subcontractors. So to track Section 3 hours, see that way they can be included with the developer's monthly report. For all labor hours worked on the project must be tracked and reported. Qualifying Section 3 labor hours must be separate from total hours so that the Section 3 percentages can be calculated. So when you turn in your hours and the form is set up for this, it gives you a spot to put in total hours and then a spot to put in qualified Section 3 hours. And we'll go over that a little bit deeper in the next slide or two. Next slide, please. Okay, so the description of how to calculate Section 3 percentages is a bit obscure. We actually had quite a discussion about it amongst ourselves, and we finally found an FAQ that explained it. And both of these paragraphs here are quotes from the HUD's Section 3 FAQs that were published on March 25th. And what it tells us is that a minimum of 25% of labor hours on any given project must be qualified Section 3 hours. Of that 25%, 5% must be applicable to targeted Section 3 workers. Targeted workers are not an additional 5% over and above the 25% minimum Section 3 hours. They're part of the 25% minimum. So really the way you can kind of look at it is 20% have to be Section 3 and 5% have to be targeted Section 3. Of course, those are minimums and you can obviously go over. But the way it's worded, it looked like it could have been trying to say you had to have 30%, but that's incorrect. Okay, next slide. Let's see. So this shows you how they're calculated. I mean, it's just a basic percentage calculation. You divide total Section 3 hours by the total number of hours. and that's got to equal 25%. And then, of course, for your targeted Section 3 workers, and you divide the total number of targeted hours by the total number of hours on the job, and that's got to be greater than 5%. Very simple. And the other thing is the form we're going to give you for that automatically calculates that for you too. All you got to do is plug in numbers. All right, so HUD realizes that Section 3 goals will not always be met. And that's okay as long as we can document that a good faith effort was made to obtain Section 3 qualified workers. So everything you do to find Section 3 workers needs to be documented. Photograph posted signs and flyers, keep copies of newspaper ads and online job postings, use sign-in sheets if you hold a job fair, document on the job training, and there's a lot of other things that you can do, but make sure you document it. So the monthly Section 3 report has a section at the bottom of the page with a checklist of items that will show the efforts made to obtain Section 3 compliance if the 25% goal is not reached every month. And it's not necessary to have 25% Section 3 labor hours every week, but we do have to have 25% of all labor hours worked on the job through the life of the job be 25%. So if it's only 20% one week, then the next week we may need to get 30% in order to meet that goal and make that average out. Now we do ask, I'll tell you what, let's do this on the form. So let's go to the next slide. So this is the top half of the Section 3 report that we're going to provide you to report every month to compliance. It's a real basic name, project name, reporting period, that type of information. And then you can see there's two columns that you'll need to complete. One of them is labeled previous total and one of them is labeled this month. So the previous total will be your carried forward balance. So that'll be, so if this is week 6, then the previous total will be the total of weeks 1 through 5, and week 6 will go in under this month. And then the total column there will total up to the complete or the number of hours, and then we'll get a percentage of how many are Section 3 and how many of them are targeted Section 3. So in the next slide, this is the bottom half of that same form, and this is what we'll use if we don't meet the 25%. There are several different reasons and several different things that you're saying that you tried, and you can pick one or as many of these as you need, like outreach efforts and job fairs, technical assistance, connecting residents with job training opportunities, things like that. And then there's an other in case you do something that does not necessarily fit in one of these categories, you can fill it in yourself. So that's what we were referring to earlier, where we were showing or talking about this is what HUD considers acceptable if we've done these things and can document these things, that if we don't meet our 25%, they'll still consider us in compliance as long as we can document that we've done one or more of these things in an effort to hire Section 3 workers. Okay, next slide. That is a couple of documents that we're going to provide to you. It's just a brief synopsis of eligibility guidelines. It'll be provided to you for your reference. It covers what Jesse covered earlier, but in a much more succinct one-page document. And next slide, I believe that pretty much ties it up for what we had to present. There's really not a whole lot of difference between the old and the new. It's just going to be how you how you record it. You're going to be recording hours rather than new hires. And another thing that makes easier too is because, you know, a lot of times when you or your contractors or subcontractors start a project, you're fully staffed. You don't need any more people. This way, the people that are already working for you count. So you don't have to go out and try and hire people or hire temporary people to meet Section 3. The people you've already got on staff can meet that requirement for you. But you know, you can also hire new people too. That works too. So if you've got any questions, feel free to ask. There's several of us here to help answer them.
Thank you, Todd and Jesse. That was a lot of information to go through, and the rule is pretty long, but I think you all were able to condense it in a good way that was hopefully easy for everyone to understand. Big key points is that this is going to be included in all contracts going forward. And in addition, we will be asking organizations to report on their efforts monthly. Todd is correct that there isn't much that has changed in terms of like reporting on those efforts. I think we have to be a little more diligent about that. That's what HUD is expecting. Also, our local CPD office, Community Planning and Development Office, is now responsible for the oversight of Section 3. And just speaking with our HUD rep, they're still trying to get their training on this as well. So I'm expecting some latitude from our local office on this, but it is an IDAS, so when it is part of HUD's system, that means we have to report on it for each activity. For every activity, it's going to come up, it's going to ask if Section 3 applies, yes or no, and if it does, then we need to be able to report on some measures at the end of the project before we close it out. So it kind of goes with the accomplishments and beneficiary data. We are still learning about this, just as you are. I went to the HUD website recently where they had several businesses before for Section 3 that had self-certified as Section 3. You could pull it up locally for San Antonio. There used to be several. When I went over there, went to that website the other day, there was maybe just one. So I know that they're, also revamping their website, but we've always offered that to anyone who is interested in becoming a Section 3 business or being registered as a Section 3 individual, that we would refer them. Either they can provide information to us and we will certify here in our office, or you can go to the HUD's website and certify, do a self-certification. But I think that one is also undergoing some changes, and I'm happy to answer any questions or have the team help answer any questions that you all might have. Okay. We will make this presentation available to all of the CHDOs. We'll also be posting it on our website, and also provide a link to the recording. So as Lori suggested, that nonprofits can use this as a resource in the future. Okay. Yes.
Oh, sorry, I'm on my phone and I'm not skilled enough to unmute myself. Sorry.
Hey, Natalie.
If we have questions, who is the best person to help if we need help filling out the forms?
Come on, go.
Well, I would think it would be, if you're with the contracts team, you can always, talk to your assigned analyst or SMA first. But then, it would also be compliance. But our expectation is that all of GMA understands this rule. So, I mean, grants, contracts, and compliance. But I would start with your analyst first.
Okay, and then my other question, and I apologize if I missed it, was are the hours only reported for the people working on the project, or are they reported if your organization is a Section 3 organization?
So if the person working on the project, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jesse or Todd, if the person is working on the project, that is somebody that would, if someone's working on the project and they work for your organization that is a Section 3 business, then you would be counting their hours. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, it is tied to the project itself. So if, for instance, you had other workers on other jobs or working back at headquarters that are qualified Section 3, their hours would not qualify towards the project that we're monitoring.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I'll follow up with you guys because I'm not sure how we could comply given the way we do our projects. So I can follow up with you guys separately.
Okay, well, we'll be glad to sit down and talk with you individually.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much for joining us. As I said, we'll make this available to everyone on this call, all the CHDOs, everybody on the CHDO list, and also add it to our the GMA's website. Thank you very much and have a great afternoon.